Hello, everyone. I wanted to update you about the changes from now on. Now on, you will be able to actually see a shorter version of the full episode, which is already uploaded. This is about 15 to 20 minutes, so you can actually enjoy. If you think that my usual episodes are all about 1 hour, and if you don't have time, you can actually look at the shorter version to understand the highlights of the conversation. So please hit the like button, subscribe, and hit the bell icon to get more updates and enjoy the shorter version of this conversation.
I'm thrilled to have you today to my podcast and talk about your passionate topic on ethical vegan. And I have your book with me. So before I deep dive into this research and so authentic book of yours, please give a brief introduction to our audience, right? And what you do and what has been your work.
Yes, thank you for inviting me to this podcast. Well, I'm a zoologist. I'm originally from Catalonia, but I've been living in the UK for more than 30 years now, so I'm a British citizen. And I work all my life in animal protection in different roles, sometimes freelance, sometimes as a employee of a reputable animal protection organizations. And at the moment, I have become a writer. You showed the book, and that book made me a writer because people like the way I write. I have already written more than 2,000 blogs and articles on vegans and animal rights and news on these subjects in the last 3 or 4 years. So that's what I'm doing for living at this moment, which is just another form of activism. The book is a combination of three stories, really. One is my life as how I become a vegan as an identity journey. The other is about veganism as a philosophy, how it became and how it becomes this ethical principle that we follow in My Save the World. And the other is my legal case, how it started and how it ended.
While you think that you are trying to live a life which is more on compassionate ground and trying to help as much possible not to hurt animals or any sentient beings for that matter, but how did that spark come for you, Jordi? I mean, I'm definitely amazed by your determination and kudos to you on taking that up and writing it, and talk about that, please. Because not many people would really think on that front, like how you have thought about way back.
So, well, what happens is when you've been vegan for a while, like myself, you your identity become everything of yourself. So any choice you make in veganism compared with other type of identities is influenced by uh, whether that choice would affect negatively another sentient being. And we live in a world where almost everything we do might
Mm.
affect us another sentient being. Therefore, we can't just have this identity in weekends or in the evenings. We have to manifest it
Yes.
24 hours, every single choice, because there's always going to be a choice that is more vegan friendly than another. Sometimes people think that in the vegan movement in particular, they think that what they need to do is to persuade others that are not vegan to behave like them, to eat what they eat, to buy the food, the clothes that they clothes. So a change of behavior. There is this idea that in order to make the world vegan, you need to change people's behavior. But that is not the way, in my opinion. The behavior is not going to be maintained if there is not a philosophy underneath. You need to change people's minds, people understanding, and then they themselves will choose the right choice. You don't have to tell people what to do.
Yes,
People get resistant
absolutely.
to that because they don't want to be told what to do. You just have to tell them what's right and what's wrong, so they can make then the connection themselves and they choose what to do. Veganism is not something that you become vegan and you have achieved it. No, is you become vegan and you begin your journey of
Yes.
veganization yourself, your friend, the world around you. So every day you're a better vegan than the day before. So that means you're still learning about the connection with animal products or any product and the animal connection. You sometimes takes years to learn that connection, or you need to talk to other vegans to tell you about. You're still learning about how to communicate better veganism. You're still learning how to get rid of your cognitive dissonances, because even if you become vegan, you still have some cognitive dissonances and contradictions in yourself. So you're growing as a person, constantly applying the principle of ahimsa, do no harm, how I can expand it, how I can do it better, how can I do it faster. And therefore it's a process. And therefore you can't just judge others because they are behind in that process, or
Yes.
because they just started. You should encourage them to pursue that process to the end result. But eventually, if that happens, and everybody goes through the same process, then we all end up being ethical and living in harmony with each other. And in this world we call the vegan world that we all dream about.
Fascinating. I mean, I think if everybody approaches life and also the way they message to people like that. I mean, most of the time, it becomes more of convincing, pushing, because it's not going to work, because end of day, it's the choice that you make, and if you know the underlying consequences of it, and you're making a conscious decision of your own choices in your life. I mean, that's nobody else to tell you what is right or wrong. It's up to you to decide. So yeah, I truly, I mean, agree with your thought process, right? In all the developed countries, we have options today, right? If
Mm.
not if you go back to somewhere, in Somalia, or probably, very deprived of all the facilities what we have today. I mean, you don't have choices on the food or whatever, you're trying to make from an ethical decision. I became vegan seven and a half year back. While I was a born vegetarian, I wasn't doing I when I felt that, by just consuming milk, I'm not doing any good. So it was an eye opener for me to understand the process of, what happens behind, and then make the right choice at that point in time. And then for me, it was not very difficult decision, because we all, including my daughter, and we all just turned overnight.
Mm.
We just thought today, okay, so I'm not going to be contributing to this cruelty, but then how do I do this? Stop it, and look at options, what you can make at home, or slowly. I mean, there are a lot of options available in the market, but then you start simple.
Well, is an issue of perception. Essentially, it's an issue of perception. When you become vegan, your perception changes. You see things that you didn't see before.
Yes.
But if you talk to a non-vegan, you can easily remember how you were seeing things before you were vegan. That are probably the same way that these other people you're talking to see them, because we all been indoctrinated into this ideology called carnism. That's the word has been used in the last few years, which I think is an interesting word, which is this ideology, prevailing ideology that is everywhere in all cultures for generations. Our parents were indoctrinated, their parents, their grandparents, for millennia, really. That basically tell us that animals don't suffer, that they are objects, they are commodities, that we can exploit it, all these sort of things that are common, this perception, are taught in the schools, not in a lesson with the title carnism, but embedded in every single lesson in all levels. And your friends and your parents and your family all teach the same narrative of we are superior and we can exploit everyone. That at one point or another, you stop seeing the animals as beings. You start seeing the suffering as suffering. You don't perceive it. So your perception has been changed. And what vegans do is they remove that indoctrination. Carnism could be called the opposite of veganism, or veganism the opposite of carnism. Veganism is the one that says, yeah, animals do suffer, animals are sentient beings, animals do matter, animals should not be exploited because they are harmed.
There are talk about, I think there is a different way of belief. I think you also mentioned about the Muslims. There was a poet, I think, the
I'm sorry.
Islamic poet from Syria,
Yeah.
right? So the poem, I think, page number 45. So I just noted down some of the pages where it was so much intense to read. So number 45. If I read that poem for everyone, right? You are deceased in understanding and religion. Come to me that you may hear something of sound truth. Do not unjustly eat fish the water has given up, and do not desire as food the flesh of slaughtered animals, or the white milk of mothers who intended its pure draught. For their young, not noble ladies, and do not grieve the unsuspecting birds by taking eggs, for injustice is the worst of crimes. And spare the honey which the bees get industriously from the flowers of fragrant plants, for they did not store it that it might belong to others, nor did they gather it for bounty and gifts. I washed my hands of all this and wished that I perceived my way before my hair went gray. Wow.
Yeah, that's a bull, Mari. If you can see behind me, you can see this square thing on
Yeah.
my wall. That is that poem. That poem is on my
This
living
is,
room over
yeah,
there,
in
because it's
page
a good
page
reminder.
45.
It's a good reminder that veganism is not a modern thing. That's
Yes.
from the 11th century in what is now Syria.
Yeah.
And he lived a long life, and he was blind, and he was 100% vegan in the sense that we understand it today, because veganism as a concept has changed over the years. But somebody that doesn't consume honey or eggs or or milk, and that's what we would call vegan today. He was like that. He would not wear leather and things like that. So therefore, veganism has been everywhere. In the book, my
Yeah.
research,
I mean, my
in the book,
point was Ashoka to Buddha
yeah.
and to Syria. So, I mean, how did you connect the dots? I mean, how did you talk about your research? I mean, this is, and you probably would have felt deeply moved with a lot of information you've gathered, from your conversations and research, right? So,
Right. I mean, I already knew quite a lot of things before I wrote the book, but the part that I didn't know that much was the history. So the one that I enjoyed the most researching for the book was the history, because I was constantly learning more things. I knew that veganism, the word vegan was created in 1944 by the Vegan Society when it was created. It was a splinter group from the Vegetarian Society. And some people still think that veganism was created then, just in the 40s. But no, that was just the latest name put to a concept that has evolved for millennia in different parts of the world. And that what I discovered that didn't come from one particular place or one particular person. It was a spontaneous idea that was manifested in the Orient by the Taoists a little bit. They didn't call it veganism. They didn't go as far as we go. But the idea of doing no harm and change your behavior and the way you eat to prevent that started there.
what is ethical vegan for you, right?
Right.
And why do you think people don't understand that the ethical part of it, and then just focus on the term vegan and then trying to contemplate or use that for fancy or more from a marketing standpoint, but then right, so I think, have you seen such, I mean, I know you would have definitely gone through products
Yeah.
and talk about your journey on, I mean, why is that so important, especially from for audience and people who really want to become vegan to know this?
Yeah, the word ethical vegan, the book is called Ethical Vegan, A Personal and Political Journey to Change the World. And some people thought that I have invented this word, ethical vegan. And it's not true. I mean, the term ethical vegan has been used from the 80s.
Yeah.
I'll tell you a bit about this history, because that's how you understand this word. So the word vegan everybody knows it was created by the Vegan Society in 1944. And they were a splinter group of the Vegetarian Society, because they were not consuming dairy and eggs, and they decided, well, let's do something different. They created that word, and they tried to define it, and it took them some years to finalize the definition. But eventually, in 1988, they found the official definition, which is still the same one today, which is good, that has lasted for so many years, which is philosophy and a way of living that seeks to exclude, as far as practicable and possible, all forms of animal exploitation and cruelty to animals. And carries on explaining a bit more details, but essentially is this: all forms of animal exploitation and cruelty to animals, not just for food and not just some animals, all of them. So that was how the idea of veganism was created. But since then, some people chose to only apply the definition to their food. So they said, I'm only going to apply it to the food. I'm still going to wear animals, I'm still going to go to entertainment where animals are exploited. And they could have been called in different ways, but some people call them dietary vegans. And then, of course, what happens is they become very numerous, and the general public started to think that a vegan is someone who eats vegan food, and that's it, without understanding that the definition had already been created and was far wider than that. So that's when the proper vegans, the real vegans, ethical vegan is another way to say a real vegan, a proper vegan, an original vegan, they decided to use the adjective ethical before the word vegan to distinct themselves from those who claim that they're vegans, but they only use it in their food. So they said, we're not like them. We actually follow the original definition. So an ethical vegan is somebody who follows the original definition of veganism from the Vegan Society. And therefore that applies veganism in all aspects of that person's life, not just the food. And still is sometimes necessary, like in my legal case, it was necessary to use that adjective to win the case, because the judge would not have given me the verdict that I require if I only had used vegan, because the other side would have claimed that veganism is just a diet. And they would have produced many vegans that claim themselves to be vegans and only for the diet. So I had to use the adjective to say, no, we're not talking about that. We're talking about those who follow the definition of veganism. So when I say veganism is being protected in the UK, only ethical veganism has been protected in the UK. So only following the definition of Vegan Society. If you only use the diet, then you're not protected. But if you follow the definition to the full, then you are.
I wanted to bring this point. It's a bit controversial, but I think it's good to talk about it, right? In general society, when you go out, you see a lot of double standard or hypocrites, right? I would want to call people, right? People who are like so much adorably um, pet their dogs and cats, and then they go to the dinner table and then they have a big turkey for Thanksgiving. Right? I'm still not able to understand the you know concept of being so partial to only dogs and cats, or probably some other few pets which you really want to pet. Uh, why not the other set of sentient beings who deserve the same kind of treatment?
Well, it all comes from what I was saying earlier, the indoctrination of carnism. Carnism does this to you. So when you teach children, we are superior, and the ones that don't look like you are inferior, and they don't feel anything, and you can exploit them, then it's up to the person to choose who are going to be those ones that are not like you. And don't remember, not that long ago, the British might have looked at the Indians as inferior. And not that long ago, the whites might have looked at the blacks or other people that are not black as inferior and treat them completely different than they would treat somebody else. So we're talking about the same phenomenon. The same indoctrination of superiority is the one that leads to racism, but also leads to speciesism, which is another way to say discrimination or looking down to ones that they are not like me. So to the other being not the ones like than me. Veganism is the opposite. Veganism is an anti-speciesist philosophy, one that fights against this looking at others as inferior. So for vegans, we all the same. We don't discriminate. Doesn't matter if it's a dog or a cat. So for vegans, it makes total sense not to eat a dog and not to eat a pig, because we see them all as deserving alive.
Yes.
For somebody that is a carnivore, will have to make a distinction. I'm going to eat this. I'm going to wear that. I'm going to play with this. And that makes no sense from a logical point of view. But they don't follow any logic. They just follow an indoctrination that they receive from their parents and their teachers. So it's for us is to our
Educate.
vegans is to remove that indoctrination, and then they will see the difference. So the similarities, then they will see that makes no sense. So a lot of the work of vegan outreach, which is this communication towards non-vegans so they can realize that they can change, is just to show what pigs do. That is the same things that the dogs do. They play, both play. So it just keeps showing them in images that show first how they both suffer equally, also how they both enjoy life equally, how they both behave like you behave when you're happy or sad or anxious or hopeful, and then basically you level. You put the humans no longer up there in the pedestal as superior. You move them down. You take the rest of the animals up until we all level. And then when we all level, we can see each other as brothers rather than as objects or commodities.
My daughter, she's 9 year old, and then we were coming from a class, and then there is a board in the restaurant. It says Happy Lamb Pot. That's the name of the restaurant. And she asked me a question. She was like, so I mean, I was so intense, and she said, if the lamb is in the pot, how it could be happy?
Mm-hmm.
So but
well, she's young. She hasn't been indoctrinated as everybody else yet.
So yeah, I mean, I'm so proud
yeah.
that she's thinking that way at that age, right? So where I think she can at least really go out and talk about it and spread that kind of awareness with her peers, and when she grows up. But the person who named would be somehow someone who is in a good mind, right? So it's and then people who go there, it's so emotional when you look at such names, and then there is, I mean, you treat it's such a hypocrisy in around the world, and then I don't think so. There's I mean, more and more communication and probably education, like people like you and me and a lot of other people talking about it, would bring some change. But I mean, I just want to bring that example, but it is difficult to digest, when you see such things openly and nobody cares.
Yeah. If you think about it, if you look at the pig or a chicken, it's far easier to realize that they are sentient beings than to think that they are food.
Yeah.
You to make that leap from that animal that walks like you, runs like you, moves like you, looks like you, to think that that's a piece of meat in a sandwich. That's such a big leap, and yet that's what we teach children. So children is that yeah, it looks like you, does everything like you, but in fact this is a piece of sandwich. And of course that's why veganism, once you show the reality, is not that difficult for people to change and understand it, because the carnist indoctrination really goes so far in teaching things that
Mm.
are fake, that they have nothing to do with the real world. Now, when you show a little bit of the real world, then it's easier to get rid of carnism. But of course, if everybody sings the same song, the same carnist song, your parents, your teachers, your friends, you still you believe it after a while. But you just need a little bit of truth, and then that little bit of truth will shine enough, and it will show itself such a truthful part of the world, that then that's when you are interested about these things. Then when you look deep, and then is when you make the switch. Now you become a vegan. So becoming a vegan is not a difficult thing to do. Everybody can do it. We just need some time and the right information and the right support. But it's not an unsurmountable mental process that you have to do to look at an animal and think it suffers, or hear the screams of a horse, and then realizing that scream is not joy, is pain. It is an instinct. We already know this, but that instinct has been erased,
We are blindsided.
eliminated by this carniv's indoctrination that sells itself as the normality, but in fact is not normal at all. It's
Yeah.
against everything in this planet.
So when you say, I mean, when we talked about ethical veganism, right? I when we became vegan, I was explaining. My wife was the one who just said, yes, let's do it. And next day she was also. We just switched overnight, but then over the period process, we had to give up a lot of things. But especially because I've been going through that for a while before I was consciously thinking about it. But then to explain a lot of things on the process, because they have not been thinking about that, at least especially my wife, she's just changed with me. So I'm so thankful, grateful to her for supporting and being there for so many years now. But through the process, we stopped going to zoo.
Hmm.
That's a conscious decision I made. The moment whenever we start going to vacation, I made a conscious decision, because it's I mean, as you said, you keep opening your eyes and trying to look at what all things where you are actually contributing from your money to such cruelty. But it's one thing which normally a lot of people don't understand is the aquarium and the zoo. But that's the way a lot of people go on vacation and with kids,
Right.
and it's terrible.
Yeah, they're prisons for animals. So they just been forced there to live in
Yeah,
captivity for entertainment, just so
factory
people can see
conditions.
animals that they could easily live their life without seeing them. Nothing would happen to them. So people don't have the right to see an animal. An animal has the right to live their life in freedom in
Wild.
their own environment, and nobody has the right to break that in order to entertain a group of children on a holiday. So, and then of course, when you look at the animal in the zoo with a vegan eye, then you start see the suffering. Then you start see the spacing up and down.